it'll seem like at every turn in life, while some are happy with the developments, some are not. Pretty much the same with this fuel price fluctuations that we've been having over time. And over the years, every time there's a fuel price hike, especially of petrol, there is a lot of reaction. Diesel has been deregulated for so many years. Kerosene has been deregulated for so many years. And the jet fuel the aviation sector uses has also been deregulated for so many years. But petrol, just until recently. So many questions as to why. We'll get into that, as well as the impact of all of these on the life of businesses and individuals in Nigeria. As you saw in the opening slide, the discussing this morning is Mr. Muda Yusuf. He's the Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, LCCI. It's good to see you again.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
First of all, we've had talks about deregulation for years. Attempts have been made and have largely been resisted. But now it would seem like it has come to stay. But then it doesn't take away the realities on ground of the direct impact of deregulation, especially of petrol, complete deregulation of the downstream sector on the people, both their businesses and their personal lives. Can you take us through some, especially of the private sector?
Well, we are dealing with a kind of dilemma at the moment, because we have a situation where we have a very fragile economy. As we speak now, we are probably already in a recession. The capacity to sustain the regime of subsidy has weakened. At the same time, we also have the dilemma of a very fragile social environment, or possibly a very tense social environment, where there is a limit to which you can push the people to make sacrifices. Because we are in a situation of very difficult choices. Talking now from the point of view of the policymakers. Of course, the government will not deliberately want to inflict hardship on the people. But if you look at, for instance, the budgets that were just announced, total revenue in that budget is slightly over 7 trillion. The current expenditure is about 5 trillion. Debt service is about 3 trillion. So by the time you take the recurrent expenditure and debt service, you have exhausted your revenue. Even the funding of capital projects is being financed from borrowing. So if you are dealing with that kind of situation, and even don't forget, recently I was reading that even some federal ministries and agencies are struggling with the payment of October salaries. It tells you how fast things are degenerating.
But that's, you know...
But again, you now have...
That of the MDAs,
yes,
according to the DG office of the budget office,
yes,
is because of the minimum wage increase that was not captured in the budget of the year under review. That's why that's, you know, that happened.
Well, whatever it is, we know that they are facing very serious revenue challenges. That is the reality. Whether at the level of the federal or states or local government. So it's a very difficult choice. But what is important at this stage is to have the discernment to ensure a balance, because in governance or in managing people or in managing an economy, it's not absolutely economics. Sometimes you have to moderate economic decisions with some social considerations. You moderate economic decisions with political considerations. You can't do straight line economics. Because now oil price is at is still under 50. And we are having these challenges. Imagine by the time oil price moves to 60 or to 70. How far can we push this? So
honestly,
these are the things. So we have to have a strategy to manage the situation so that we don't have a complete derailment of the whole deregulation philosophy or policy.
I mean, when you say imagine what it will be when prices are 70, 80, I just imagine the pump price. But you talked about moderating the effects on people having, I mean, like social economics, having some sense of, okay, don't let's go the long haul. Let's temper this with some moderation. Do you think that with the announcements and the government's, I mean, things the government is doing, would you say that the government has moderated this enough for the people?
Well, the government, in my view, is doing its best within the limit of the resources available to it. But for some of us, we can do a lot more. Because it is not every measure that we take to make life easy or easier for the people that has to be driven by cash. You know, the quality of your policy environment can make a whole lot of difference. The quality of your institutions can make a whole lot of difference. The way you relate with all these small business people, you know, the kind of tax environment, the way you relate with people at the port, at the border, and all of that, those things also go a long way.
Talking about that, Mr. Yusuf, let me follow up on the question Kadi asked you and put it this way. In terms of moderating the decisions, the economic decisions with social, political, and other considerations, it's like all the increases are coming about the same time. With the minimum wage increase came electricity tariff increase, came fuel price increase, and naturally, food price increases have followed. When the first increase happened of the fuel price, Labour stood up because it happened about the same time as the electricity tariff increase. The electricity tariff increase is supposedly deregulated. Now we're trying to deregulate the downstream sector completely now. It's all economics. Government has to take, as you said, these hard decisions, but all coming at the same time when the earning power is not increasing, the buying power is not increasing, and as you said, businesses are not finding it funny. So where then is the moderation, and how do we balance all these?
Well, from the point of view of strategy, perhaps the bunching up of all of these decisions at the same time, I don't think it's a good strategy. It is not, because the pressure on the people is quite enormous. And you can see the effect of the little trigger we had with the NSAS and all these protests. You can see the consequences of that. Of course, there were elements of criminality in what happened, but there were also elements of social discontent in what happened. So it shows how bad the situation is. And I'm sure that the government also got the message that something needs to be done. So the fuel price increase, the LCCI tariff, of course, from the economic point of view, there are very sound arguments. Because even to make life better for the people, you need investment. It is through investment that you can create jobs. It is through investment that even government itself can generate revenue. So investment has a big role to play also in stabilizing the social environment. If you do not deregulate, you cannot get investment into the downstream.
But then they are
Look at what we have suffered. We have been in oil production for close to 50 years. You don't have a functioning refinery. And all of these things are happening because we left the entire thing in the domain of government. Government is not structured to be managing that kind of enterprise. That is why, in spite of all the turnaround maintenance and all of that, nothing has happened.
I'm sorry, when people
And
say...
the biggest bill...
Just a moment.
No, just let me just finish.
Okay.
The biggest pressure on our reserves today is importation of petroleum products. Because we are spending billions of dollars annually importing. We are perhaps the only oil-producing country that imports petroleum products to that magnitude. And yet we are not producing country. Imagine what will have happened to our reserves if our refineries were working. You know? So these are, just as I said, it's a kind of dilemma.
I find it curious, really, when people say government should not be involved in businesses like that of such magnitude. I wonder if government can't handle that. So what can government handle? Because when you hear about the refineries, the earliest possible time we can get them to even 50% in working capacity is December 2021. And that has been dragging on for a while. So if we can't trust government with our refineries or things of that magnitude, what can we trust government with? What's the essence of government then?
You see, look, take a look at all the things that government is handling. From health to education to security to even transportation. In which of these areas will you say that government has performed well? But typically, to manage a system, particularly when you are dealing with a system where you have very weak public institutions, weak in terms of capacity and weak also in terms of the whole idea of transparency and integrity in the way we manage things.
I think that really is the issue.
The less we put in the domain of government, the better for the economy.
Perhaps the challenge isn't whether or not government can handle it, but whether we have engineered and tinkered with the engine of government in a way that it can handle these things. Because if we look at government, we're looking at two categories of people specifically. We're looking at elected officials who are there terminally, and then we are looking at people who are there for decades on end. And, you know, that's perhaps where, the problem is. But looking at the issues around this deregulation, it is definitely costly. Who is it costing the most? Because some people would say that the cost of regulation is of deregulation of the downstream sector completely, the fuel price increase in particular, the resultant fuel price increase or fluctuations that will happen from time to time. The cost will be borne more in the short term by people who buy petroleum products, and which are individuals and private organizations. What do you say to that?
You see, in your opening remarks, you identify the components of petroleum products that have already been deregulated. Diesel, for instance. All these trucks you see moving around, moving even food items across the country, they are running on diesel. And close to 70 or 80% of the movement of these food items are by these trucks. They are running on diesel. All the major production centers, factories, and all of that, they are not running on petrol. They are running on diesel generator. Well, the moment you have a sizable, business which you need to power, you can't use petrol generator to power it. You use diesel, or you use gas, or you use the LPFO. But majority use diesel. This has been deregulated for a long time. So from the point of view of business operations, in terms of production, in terms of transportation, there is more dependence on diesel than on petrol. But from the point of view of the average citizens, and this is why the issue of petrol price is so sensitive, the interface between the average Nigerians and petrol is much higher. I'm talking of direct interface now, than the interface between them and diesel or AGO or Jet A fuel, which is aviation fuel. So a lot of movement around, unlike what we have in some other advanced economies. You don't have to go out. I mean, you have to go put your car on the road. I'm talking of those who are probably in the middle class. In many of these advanced countries, you don't have to do that. You go on mass transit, which are very convenient. But here we are, unless you put your vehicle on the road, you can't have comfort going in public transport most of the time. So you have the case in which the entire middle class, everybody is on the road. And look at even the cost of that to the economy, fuel consumption, the pollution, the stress, the traffic, and all of that. These things happen because there is almost a complete absence of good public mass transportation system. And some of these shortcomings are outcomes of negligence over years. And that is where the challenge is. When you have a problem that has accumulated over time and you now want to fix it, suddenly within a short time, it can be very problematic. It can be very difficult. Then we have our SMEs. You have a small shop, you want to power it. Of course, you cannot go and buy a diesel generator. You have to buy a petrol generator.
Which creates the problem that we're talking about here now, because
Yes.
about 60 to 70% of businesses in Nigeria are SMEs. And they
Yes.
run, these generators.
They run on this. They run, this is why I'm saying that the interface or the direct impact is much higher on all these small businesses, and of course those who even go in public transport.
And on the short term, medium term, or the long term?
No, immediately. And this is where we have a problem with this policy. The cost and the impact is immediate. The benefits of it is in the medium to long term. Because the benefits of this policy lies in bringing more investment, creating more jobs, reducing pressure on our foreign reserves, and all of that. And even possibly making the country a hub for petroleum refining and export for the sub-region. These are the medium to long-term things that we are going to realize. So there's a mismatch between the cost and the benefit in terms of timing.
If we could just step back a bit, people ask, is there a way we could have done this better? In terms of deregulation, I mean, you mentioned the other derivatives of crude oil, but petrol specifically, we're saying we're moving into deregulation, but it's only the NMPC that can import. A lot of people are saying, open this up, ensure that other people get the prices of the forex at competitive rates so they can also import. Do you think if we had done that, this would have resulted maybe better prices, much lesser prices than what we have right now?
That is very correct. And this is what I call the critical success factors for deregulation. You cannot deregulate and you still have a monopoly situation. Because the whole objective of deregulation is to ensure that there is competition. Because it is through competition, first, that you can moderate prices. It is through competition that you can ensure that the vulnerable groups are not exploited, the consumers are not exploited. But here we are, we said that we have deregulated. And the whole objective of deregulation is that more players can come on board. And as more players come on board, there will be competition. And as competition intensifies, the scope for exploitation or for charging people arbitrarily will reduce. But now we are still stuck with a situation where only the NNPC is importing petroleum products.
But you know that
so
this
all the marketers now,
right,
because they say they don't have access to foreign exchange, they cannot import.
But this
so we are
sector
back to square one.
It has consistently defied logic, this petroleum sector. So I imagine the argument for the government is, what about areas we can't exactly regulate, that you have filling stations? They can decide to set the prices at whatever they want. They could say, you know what, 200, since there is no competition, in quote, we're the only filling station in this place. So the argument is, okay, let government be the only one to import, so we can at least set the ex-depot price. So you can decide to now add some certain fees on top of it and sell at this particular band. So looking at that argument and seeing what has played out in this sector, do you still think that deregulating in that sense will still make prices come lower?
No, it will make a whole lot of difference. And I give you an example. When we started with this mobile telephone thing, this GSM, we were buying a SIM card for as high as between 40 to 50,000 naira. When we first had the first provider. Because of the first mover advantage, there was a short-term monopoly advantage at that time. That was why SIM card was selling for 40,000, 50,000. And people were buying. Particularly those at the higher bracket of the citizens or the economy. How much is SIM card today? People say that if prices go up, it doesn't come down. Has it not been coming down in the telecom sector?
But the telecom
Even
sector,
beggars now. Beggars are now carrying mobile phone.
but for the telecom sector,
It is competition. Let me finish.
No.
Just to tell you
Just to put
what
this in.
competition can do.
I understand, but for telecom sector, you can stay here and have access to the different service providers, right? Just right here. You can either use any of the SIMs and it will work.
Yes.
But for the petroleum sector, if you stay here and there's only one filling station, you can only access that one filling station in your area. It's not like the telecom sector where you can, take out the SIM and put this other one in it. It can't work like that.
Do you know
for
how
the
many
sector.
filling stations we have in Lagos alone?
I'm talking about areas where you have maybe just about one or two. those areas.
No. You see, if there is anything we are not short of, it's filling stations. It's filling stations. Even right now, as I'm speaking to you, some people are selling at 169. Some are selling at 168. Some are selling at 163. I've had an instance, even recently, I got to a station, I saw 170. I just drove off.
That's the luxury of staying in the urban areas.
Yes.
Imagine those staying in the rural areas where you have just one filling station in almost like a town. You understand. You have one ATM in a town.
I'm
so
from
how
a
does it work
village.
there?
I'm from a village.
Right.
First, in most of these rural areas, you don't even have the regular filling stations. What you have are all these surface tanks. They go to the city, they buy in all these BBJ and put in surface tanks. And you have 1, 2, 3 of them. The moment they are going to about 2 or 3, competition will creep in. If it's too expensive in your village, you move to the next village. Yes.
Okay, well, Mr.
that
Yusuf,
is the way it is.
let's just hope that people can be able to move from village to village. But you've talked about the short-run social effects, and I'd like us to close on that. So there are things, just as you have said, in the immediate, people need to have some understanding, which you have been trying to, tell us about now. In the long run, major investments, from all the work that you have been doing at LCCI, the studies and all of that. But those short-run social effects are critical. They are crucial. How do we inform people or pass on the communication in a way that they can accept it and at least get a little bit more understanding of what government is doing, because you know that the trust deficit is low?
Yes. First, we need to do a lot more education on this. It's very important to let people see the benefits of the policy. The benefits may not come immediately, but it's something that for the sustainability of this economy, for future generation, we need to build an economy that is sustainable. This is the way to go. But the challenge is that when a man is hungry, by the time you are even saying all of this, they will say that you are just speaking grammar. That there is no food, no this, no that, salary is not increasing, prices are going up, and all of that. So the government also needs to be very creative in managing this situation. This is not straight line economics. We need to see how we manage the social aspect of
Especially because of those issues that you raised in the
this.
slides.
Yes. We need to manage the social aspect.
Take a look at that third
Yes.
one, which is, something that's make people react, so to speak.
Exactly. Because purchasing power is getting weak, unemployment is increasing, prices are going up. Look at the percentage of people who are poor.
Mr. Yusuf, don't
So
forget.
there has to be some, very creative ways of dealing with this. Even if you have to just set aside some money for some intervention or to identify a few filling stations in some areas and say, okay, if you want to queue for 2 or 3 hours and get the fuel at this price, you can go there. Of course, The wealthy ones will not go and queue. They can drive their SUVs, even if they are selling at 200 naira. They buy it, fill their tank, and move
But that
away.
would be some form of subsidy. But
Yes.
recall that when this happened in September, we had a hike in September. Labour said, we're going to go on strike. And they had that negotiation with the federal government on two issues, electricity tariff and petrol price hike. Electricity was negotiated, but petrol stayed. I mean, we're deregulating, so there's no going back on this. But don't forget, the federal government promised palliatives. They promised to provide buses for mass transit. Well, that's in 2021. They also promised some other things. But from now till 2021, we have over a year. What should the government be doing, maybe in terms of palliatives? Because you talked about poverty, you talked about hunger. So what should government be doing aside having a filling station where they can purchase for this price? What should they be doing to ensure that the people that fall in that bracket don't feel this too much?
Well, first, unfortunately, some of the interventions are not quick wins. Even the mass transit. I mean, we are dealing with a population of 200 million people. It will take some time for you to even feel the effect of a mass transit intervention. But that is one way to go. And in many countries of the kind of size, the kind of population that we have, we are not so dependent on road transportation.
Well,
You have the rail system that can move thousands of people at the same time.
Well, Mr. Yusuf, I think you already raised a very crucial to-do for government, which is to communicate aright with all of this. But I really wish we could continue on this because
Without
usually,
communication, right?
yes, But we have to thank you very much for your time this morning and hope that when this conversation surfaces again, you will surface.
Thank you.
Mr. Muda Yusuf is the Director General of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, LCCI. Thanks for your time once again.